This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
It's the Marathon Monday show for the next couple weeks. Got two major important events to cover here. One classic and one upcoming event. And the journey begins this week as we take a look at one of the more infamous WrestleMania events of all time. And I guess WrestleMania XL is TBD on where that stands in the pantheon of all-time manias. We also have classic NXT to get into today, all of which we will cover shortly. I will not waste too much time with the intros here because I know the WrestleMania report is going to take a while to get through. So if you are watching the FSWR channel for the first time, make sure to subscribe, comment, and give the show a like if you don't mind. We are here on YouTube and Rumble every Monday and Friday for new podcasts and new discussions. I've had a couple standalone events on both podcasts in the last week or two. That's kind of how things go in the wrestling business. There are those quiet periods throughout the year where not a whole lot of great interest is going on. And then there's that time of year where everything's basically crammed into like 1 or 2 months. And it's just nonstop show after show after show after show. It's hard to keep up with a lot of it. But we are in the thick of it right now, with the WrestleMania season being the big headline. Next weekend, it is make or break moment for Cody Rhodes. And here with WrestleMania XI, it is the make or break moment for everybody's sanity. And here it is. The review nobody asked for. The WrestleMania that should have read the tagline, seen and regrettably unforgotten. It was a dark day for the World Wrestling Federation. This WrestleMania holds a special place in a lot of fans' hearts. And not for entirely good reasons. The time has come. WrestleMania XI. And where do we start? Well, I guess it'd be appropriate to point out that within the first 30 seconds, they pretty much made it abundantly clear who the stars were on this thing. They plugged just about every B and C-list celebrity they booked for this fiasco. Made absolutely no mention of the wrestlers. But they were there. They were just in the background, putting over said celebrities. Now, we already knew about the NFL crossover stuff they were doing. At least Mongo and LT were wrestling savvy when it came to knowing at least something about pro wrestling. The rest of these schmucks, I honestly couldn't tell you if they've ever seen a wrestling match in their lives. But they were here. Nicholas Torturo of NYPD Blue, the fucking home improvement dork, Jonathan Taylor Thomas. No idea what the hell he had to do with this show. Salt and Peppa, the D-list female pop group. Again, what? And like, remove the stuff with Lawrence Taylor and all the football players, which they were already building up on Raw. The rest of these names, I mean, it's not like even like they were integral parts of the pay-per-view just to show up for a few seconds and wave for the camera. Like, why do we need all these celebrities again? Well, it's not a rhetorical question. I know exactly why. so they didn't have to spend so much time focusing on the bullshit card they presented. A card that stunk to high heaven. But getting past all the patriotism and fanfare, not that I'm anti-American when it comes to our patriotic songs. I just hate listening to horrible musicians try to sing them. We had Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler on commentary. Oh, by the way, this took place at the Hartford Civic Center. A jam-packed 16,305 people in attendance. And I'm sure every single one of them never watched a day of wrestling in their life after this catastrophe. I mean, why would you? Just take a look at the first match on the card. A complete last-minute throw-in that made absolutely no sense. It's Lex Luger and Davey Boy taking on the Blue Brothers. And that right there, just stop. Back it up. A WrestleMania card that you are asking me to pay full pay-per-view price for, and the first match you give me is a match featuring the fucking Harris twins? Eat a dick. That's all I have to say. That automatically makes this the worst WrestleMania of all time. I have no memory of this match ever taking place. But it was in fact as wretched as it sounds on paper. Just within the first minute, both teams managed to fuck up a double power slam attempt off the ropes, where the Harris brothers basically landed right on top of each other. I wrote down in all caps, shit. And at no point during this match were Vince and Jerry ever able to discern which brother was which. If the Blue Brothers had names, you never would have known it based on the commentary. For the record, I think it was Jake and Eli. Lex Luger's career continues to flounder with each passing month we review his WWF run. I mean, at this point, it's just flat out depressing. I think this is one of the last things he does in his WWF run before his departure later in the year. This, oh God, what were they calling them at the time? The Allied Powers, I think it was. Now, obviously, this was their debut match, with virtually no build-up or advertisement. They just kind of threw them together and said, go get some matching tights and go be a tag team. And I think they got like one title shot out of it before the team broke up later and Luger left the company. The match, like I said, was beyond abysmal. Watching the Harris twins work and bump is like watching giant wooden boards tumble over in the parking lot. God, they're so stiff with everything they do. Like, because they're so massive, it makes everyone's life miserable trying to do anything with them. Like, even Bulldog didn't have much to work with here. But eventually Luger gets the hot tag and runs wild before the Blue Brothers pull some twin magic. And while one of them is playing possum, Davey Boy has the ref to try to get his attention. There's a brief moment where he's working over Luger until Davey Boy gets a blind tag and then immediately stacks him up for the 3 count. I will conclude my notes by saying 7 minutes of absolute sheer garbage. And we'll just move on. Or one match in, and it's already a negative star rating. And because nothing on the show can go right, they then try to pitch to the heel locker room so that one of the guest celebs can try to interview the $1 Million Club. Or corporation, whatever they're fucking called, who cares? And of course, the microphone doesn't work. So there's like 30 seconds of dead air time where we see Turturro's mouth moving. There's no audio, but they keep the cameras rolling. And then they just eventually kick it back to the arena so Vince and Jerry can laugh it off. And they pan the camera around to show the fans so they can try to work out all the technical glitches. We were now officially 10 minutes into the show, and I was already over it, which then brought us to the second match on the card, a Royal Rumble rematch. It is Jeff Jarrett defending the Intercontinental Championship against Razor Ramon. And y'all remember the Royal Rumble 95 match these guys had. It was actually really good. Overbooked, yes. But it was a classic old school title match with a lot of Memphis effects sprinkled in. This one was not so much the same story. But before we critique anything, let's talk about the inset promo they attempted to air beforehand, where Vince tries to pitch to a live interview with Razor and the 1-2-3 Kid. And his first question to the Kid, "Can you guys hear me?" And, well, Sean could hear Vince. Did not really work the other way around. Yes, this is now our second interview on the show where we had a malfunctioning microphone. Can anything on this show go right? The answer was no, by the way, in case I wasn't already self-evident. I did like here, they waited until after the bell rang and Razor had already gotten in a few clean shots to Double J, and then they set off his signature pyro. Because they had to make sure they got those special effects in. So, I mean, they tried. They really did. I can't call this a bad match because, I mean, they worked hard. They tried to piece together a coherent match. It just never really came together, though. The chemistry was off. There was a lot of clunkiness going on where both guys just really didn't seem to be on the same page. They slowed it down a little bit so Jarrett could get some heat and work the crowd, and that was all fine. I don't know what the issue was, though. It kind of seemed like they may have had a bunch of pre-planned spots they wanted to do, but instead of like making it look seamless and actually try to build to them throughout the match, they were just sort of doing their spots at very random points. You know, whether it was the stuff with the roadie running interference, Double J getting chased around ringside by the 1-2-3 Kid, like the double bonk spot where Razor and Jarrett collided heads. Everything just seemed to happen at very sporadic periods. Like they were sleepwalking through their prearranged spots. I don't know. It's hard to describe unless you watch the match in full to understand what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm just not articulating it well. The thing I couldn't understand for the life of me, why was the 1-2-3 Kid running interference on behalf of Razor when it was never called for? Like, I know the Kid ends up going heel later on, but this all just seemed a little too soon for him to be teasing a heel turn. There's a spot here where he tries to pull Jarrett into the ring post by his crotch. There was nothing that led up to it. Waltman just saw Jarrett in the corner and said, "No, the ref's not looking. I'm going to try to help out my brother Razor." And he did the same shit a few minutes later when Razor turned over Jarrett in a figure four, just blatantly reaching through the ropes to grab Razor's hands to help him out. He's not a bad guy. Of course, the ref saw him and forced a break. And Lawler was calling it out. He's like, that should be an automatic disqualification. I don't disagree. Yeah, the babyface interference from Sean Waltman here made absolutely no sense. And it all eventually leads to the finish where Razor tries to give Jarrett the Razor's Edge, but then Road Dogg slips in the back door and chop blocks Razor at the knee. So it is a DQ finish. And the crowd was not too happy about that. I mean, I'm not opposed to DQ finishes, but doing it here, especially when the match really wasn't any good to begin with, I didn't really dig the fuck finish here. Now, the post-match with everybody, that was good. God, the chemistry with the Kid and Road Dogg was on point. There's your DX plug a few years early. But watching these guys go at it momentarily, I was like, damn, those guys work really well together. But yeah, overall, I just really wasn't a fan of this match. It was a major step down from the Rumble match. Again, it wasn't terrible or anything. But considering the workers and the fact that they were already coming off that really strong pay-per-view match a couple months prior, I don't know, this just came off like a dud. And I forget where this all goes from here. I know these guys feud for a little bit longer. I think Razor ends up winning the belt back from Jarrett eventually. But it's been so long. I mean, I can't remember the specifics of what happens. I know those In Your House pay-per-views are coming up soon. That's probably where they eventually blow this all off. God, I just remember the In Your House events. Am I going to wind up reviewing all those too? God. Where's Thunderbolt Patterson when I need him? If I only had time. So here's the point where we finally got the Nicholas Turturro interview in the locker room with all the boys. With a functioning microphone this time. And this was mainly memorable for Shawn Michaels and Sid Vicious coming in to do a promo. And Sid was screaming directly over Pamela Anderson the whole time. You see her standing there covering her ears and wincing. Fucking iconic. You want to know what was not iconic? King Kong Bundy versus The Undertaker. Actually, that may be a lie. It was iconic. Iconically bad. Undertaker being accompanied here by the, quote, ghastly pallbearer. Just say the quiet part out loud, Vince. May as well just call him rotund. And we're already going all in with the fat shaming. My God. Watching The Undertaker's body of work from like 93 to 95, all the times I've sat here and mentioned how he's still my all-time favorite wrestler, that poor guy was involved in a lot of bad shit. Bad matches, bad programs, bad segments, bad promos. It actually makes me value him that much more as a talent. Just the simple fact that he still managed to rise above all this hideous booking. Man, oh man. And speaking of ghastly, it's exactly what this match was. Slow, plodding, ghastly. Quite frankly, just downright dismal. I mean, watching Bundy here, the guy's barely mobile. They had to smoke and mirrors the shit out of this thing just to keep the pace up. Like doing spots where Taker gets possession of the urn, just so Kama can run out minutes later and steal it back. He actually cut a promo in the middle of the match. Jim Ross tries to run up the aisleway to confront him. And Kama's like, I'm going to take this urn and I'm going to melt it down and turn it into a necklace. Meanwhile, the match just gets worse and worse the longer it goes. Bundy's totally blown up. Taker literally can't do anything physically with the guy. The best he got at the very end was a body slam followed by a running clothesline off the ropes. Which, by the way, was the finish. Yeah, the classic Undertaker diving clothesline where he leaps into the air and takes the guy down. That was the finish. not a chokeslam, not a tombstone, God forbid, a running, diving clothesline. Wow. At which point, they put the camera on one mark in the crowd dressed from head to toe in Undertaker's apparel. That was quite a sight. A grown adult man wearing what was essentially a Grim Reaper outfit. Guaranteed that guy never got laid in his life. If he is still alive today, there's no way that guy got pussy. So yeah, this was utter garbage. Again, I regret nothing. Taker is still my all-time favorite wrestler. But I'm not about to sit here and sugarcoat all the bad shit he had to deal with over the years. This was easily one of the worst Mania matches he's ever had. Definitely a toss-up between this one and the match with Giant Gonzalez a couple years before. And again, we are still at the point in his career where they are casually bringing up the fact that Taker's never been defeated at WrestleMania. There's no mention of a streak. There's no mention of anybody trying to challenge Taker to hand him his first loss at WrestleMania. It's kind of one of those things where they stumbled into it inadvertently. And they had such a good thing going for all those years until they fucked it up with Brock like 10 years ago. Still by far one of the dumbest booking calls they've ever made. At least they were smart enough to have Taker win here. But it came at a price. And I don't care that Ted DiBiase was at ringside. Even he couldn't deliver a price to make me want to ever see this match again. It'll take some Clockwork Orange trickery to get me to forcibly watch this abomination ever again. Moving on, we had more celebrity garbage that I fast-forwarded through. I believe Taylor Thomas beat Bob Backlund at chess. You all paid for this, by the way. Just want to remind you of that. And then we had the mystery tag match with no build-up. Owen Hart. He was on the hunt to find a tag partner so he could wrestle for the WWF Tag Team titles. Despite the fact that we literally just saw Owen do a clean job for Brett less than a week prior on Raw. Via submission. All of a sudden, he is next in line for a title shot. Only in the world of WWF logic. But of course, I think most people remember who his partner wound up being. It is the official in-ring return for Yokozuna, with Jim Cornette and Mr. Fuji accompanying. Yoko had been gone for several months at the very least, correct? I think the last time we saw him, it was Survivor Series in the casket match with Taker, right? And he's been gone basically since that point. And upon his return, he came back bigger and larger than we'd ever seen him before. Even his titties were starting to grow titties at this point. That's how ginormous this man was. He was also sporting a very unkempt beard. This did not help his physical appearance any. Still, he was easily the second best worker in the match behind Owen. For those that already forgot, the Smoking Guns are still the WWF Tag Team Champions. Or at least they were up until the finish of the match here. Up to this point in the pay-per-view, this was easily the best match on the card. And it was an average TV match. Not to take anything away from the newly formed duo. I mean, the dichotomy of Owen and Yoko as partners always worked. Just because they were total polar opposites in every way imaginable. I mean, it was probably their safest bet at bringing back Yokozuna to do tag matches instead of trying to get him to work long singles matches on a consistent basis. At least Owen could bump and sell while Yoko could catch his breath on the apron. I mean, like I said, it was a serviceable middle-of-the-road tag match. It had a very WWF formula to the layout. Yoko was able to work over the guns for the heat. They end up doing the miscue spot where Owen goes for the missile drop kick, but accidentally takes out Yoko. And they let Bart get a flurry of offense until Owen pulls down the rope and Bart goes sailing out to the floor. And that's where Yoko set up Billy in the corner to kill him with a bonsai drop. And then we get this phenomenal finish, straight out of the Owen Hart playbook. Bart ends up getting dumped out to the floor yet again. He tried to stop Yoko from covering Billy a few seconds ago. So with Billy dead to rights at this point, Yoko tags in Owen. Owen teases that he's about to win via sharpshooter. And then he just pins Billy. And of course he has to celebrate like he did all the work. Meanwhile, all he did was pick up the scraps after Yokozuna already did the damage. Classic Owen Hart douchebaggery. Gotta love it. So the finish was great. The rest of the match, it was, like I said, kind of your average Raw main event at best. I mean, the title change was the more important takeaway from all this. This will eventually lead to the Camp Cornette stuff later on, and the continuation of Owen and Yokozuna as a tag team, and the wondrous storytelling to follow. But like I said, I mean, up to this point, we were about an hour into the card. It was hands down the best match we'd seen up to this point. And it did not trend upwards from here. Because that led us to the submission match, and or I Quit match, depending on how you view it. It's definitely I Quit. Don't let Howard Finkel fool you. Bret Hart versus Bob Backlund. One of the many layered feuds Bret had going on at this point. He had just wrapped up the beef with Owen on Monday. And now he is here at WrestleMania to settle the beef with Backlund. And of course, that wasn't the only thing here of importance. This match also had a special guest referee assigned to it. Why? I have no idea. But the guest referee for this I Quit match is none other than Rowdy Roddy Piper. And again, why? No fucking idea. Just because. Because they knew it would get a pop. Oh, and trust me when I tell you, having Piper out there as comedic relief was a blessing in disguise. Because without him, whew, this match, talk about the cure to insomnia. All right, so where to begin? Well, first off, this had nothing to do with the match, but I had to bring it up because it was so Vince McMahon. For all the people that believe Vince never understood history and completely forgot every last detail of shit that happened years prior in his own fucking company, well, it was very telling in this match. Lawler's trying to bring up WrestleMania XI, the classic between Bret Hart and Roddy Piper for the IC title. And of course, he's milking the conversation by going, remember who beat Bret to become the IC champion at WrestleMania XI, Vince? And Vince, not joking, outright goes, British Bulldog? And Lawler, completely taken aback by that statement, goes, what? And when he revealed that it was Piper, Vince just goes, oh yeah. There is no way he was ribbing. I think Vince McMahon legitimately forgot who Bret faced at WrestleMania 8. That is how little Vince paid attention to his own history. So for all the people that gave Vince shit over the years for being horrible with remembering details, well, here you go. Case in point. Guy literally forgot one of the featured matches on his WrestleMania card 3 years prior. Now, of course, I already mentioned the comedy relief from Piper here. He had some great moments. One of my favorites was the point where Bret is working over Backlund in a toe hold. Piper goes over to Backlund and goes, "What do you say? Backlund?" And Backlund shouts, "No!" Piper shrugs. There's a momentary pause. And then he looks down at Bret and goes, "Hart?" And Hart looks up at him and goes, "No." Awesome. Fucking amazing. The gall of Roddy Piper to ask Bret if he gives up while he's applying his own fucking submission hold. And Bret's just like, "What are you talking about, dude?" I think even Piper was starting to realize, yeah, this shit's boring as fuck, bro. I need to entertain myself somehow. And it sucks too, because it is a technically sound match if you boil it down to like grassroots mad wrestling. But it just never really got out of first gear. They just kind of laid around on the mat in holds for like 2/3 of it. The crowd was pretty much anywhere from cold to lukewarm in terms of responding to anything. I don't know. It's like they were trying to work an old school territory match in front of a WWF crowd. I don't think the people got it. I mean, I in particular didn't like it because it just wasn't even really an exciting old school territorial style match. It was very one-dimensional. There were a couple fun moments with Piper, but that's about it. I mean, the conversation kind of follows the pattern of what I was talking about with Double J and Razor. I mean, this was a rematch dating all the way back to Survivor Series last year. And that match was 100 times better than this one, by leaps and bounds. And so on paper, I mean, you think the I Quit stipulation should have added an element of thrill to see the blow-off. Instead, they just kind of did a going-through-the-motions submission match with a pretty lame finish. Bret catches Backlund in the chicken wing. He wrestles him down to the mat. Also, Piper has a clear path to bring the microphone up to his mouth. And all we get out of Backlund is, "Ah! Ah! Ah!" And apparently that was enough for Piper to say, "Yep, I heard it. He quit. Ring the bell." Well then, apparently Piper understands gibberish a lot better than me. Because I did not make out the words "I quit" from that. I mean, maybe Piper was just bored, called for the bell as a shoot. In that case, I applaud him. Because he saved us another 10 minutes of torture. I mean, you probably read the stories from Bret over the years. He does not look back at this as one of his fonder career highlights. And understandably so. Even when he won, you could tell he was kind of frustrated about the whole thing. It's just another one of those matches that didn't work in execution. I don't really know what else to say about it. It was lame. It was dull. It had no energy. Crowd didn't help. They just kind of sat on their hands and looked on, totally bored. It's another match you got to chalk up into the dud column. And from here, I think they pretty much move on from all the Backlund stuff. Get ready to set up Bret for his other 30 ongoing feuds. The big one upcoming, I think, is the Lawler program. But that's all there really is to say about it. I'm no Bret Hart fan. I never claimed to be. But even I kind of felt bad for him after this. Because you knew he wanted to have a better match than this. For whatever reason, though, just didn't click. And if you say the root cause was Bob Backlund, go fuck yourself. You're probably just mad you can't recite all 46 presidents backwards in the timeline. But that takes us to our semi-main event. After literally just watching the most boring WrestleMania match of all time, I can tell you who I didn't need to see follow that. It was Big Sexy Kevin Nash. They went there. And, well, this was the point where they decided to spam all the celebrities by having them all come out and wave for the camera. Special timekeepers, special ring announcers, special valets. It was specially time filler. And let me tell you, they were looking for any and all excuses to delay ringing the bell for this one. The milking of Pamela Anderson before the opening bell. That was a sight to behold. Also a sight to behold was Shawn's attitude in this match. Y'all hear people talk about Shawn being a dick over the years. You want to know why I was never a Shawn Michaels fan around this point? This fucking match. God, he was a prick here. Just acting like an insufferable douche the entire time. Overselling the shit out of everything. Yanking cameramen around ringside. Bad-mouthing off camera. Just being a total snide asswipe. And Kevin Nash was no saint himself. But the patience he had dealing with Shawn here, gotta give the guy credit. I don't remember that match with Hulk Hogan all that well. I know Shawn was pissed about having to do the job there. But if it was anything like this match he had with Diesel, I can imagine it was a very same scenario. And I'm not trying to make this out to be a Shawn Michaels hit piece. I mean, if you need further validation on how much of a train wreck the Diesel title run was, the psychology of this match was all over the fucking map, dude. You get half the audience chanting for Shawn. Half the people were chanting for Sid at one point. Maybe like a quarter of the audience was behind Diesel at various points. Shawn's doing all his high spots and getting massive pops because, while they're flashy, they're obviously going to get babyface reactions. Like all the points Diesel's in there throwing Shawn around like a rag doll. You know, the people are just kind of sitting on their hands. Some people were audibly laughing at Shawn's overselling. Just a total disaster. And I can't say Shawn wasn't trying here. He said he was going to give the people a performance of a lifetime. We know the guy's a spotlight hogger. I mean, he at least tried to work an injury angle with targeting Diesel's ribs. Again, it didn't help that working the injury involved him doing a bunch of high spots and top rope moves. You know, so when Diesel started his comeback, the people were kind of bummed out. Because that meant more boring power moves and hair flips. Of course, out of everybody involved, best worker in the entire match was Earl Hebner. He was working an ankle injury at one point to milk a slow count. And they didn't show it on camera. There's a spot on the floor where Hebner was trying to hold back Sid. And he was down for a while, grabbing at the knee. Meanwhile, Shawn caught Diesel with a super kick and had a visual pin on him for almost a full minute. And they're in there trading some stuff toward the end. They completely fucked up an exposed turnbuckle spot where Sid had cut off the top pad with a pocket knife. Fast forward a couple minutes later, Diesel goes to slingshot Shawn into the top buckle, but completely misses. Of course, he has to sell it like he's dead, even though the camera clearly caught the fact that Shawn missed. So they try to improvise for another minute while Diesel's trying to fire up. And he eventually catches Shawn with a really sloppy-looking jackknife powerbomb where Shawn pretty much rotated around and landed on his feet. Because did I mention he's a fucking dickwad? And then Diesel finally won. So I think the big takeaway from this, fuck Shawn Michaels. And, some people probably thought the match was good. I just can't stand Shawn around this point because of the unprofessionalism. It's like I watch a match like this, I'm getting more visibly irritated the longer it goes. The problem is that it doesn't improve from here. Because if you think it's bad now, just wait until they put the fucking belt on him. Jesus, are we in for a rude awakening. But this was not Shawn's night. Diesel retains. When Shawn and Sid are walking up the aisleway like 8 seconds later after it's over, already Shawn's no-selling the jackknife. I can't really add much more. The Diesel title reign does not get any better from this point. Come early summer, the people were about to riot. It was so bad. Meanwhile, we should probably talk about this since we're not reviewing the Fallout Raw after Mania. Slight spoiler here, but I'll go ahead and mention it anyway. Shawn ends up splitting from Sid after Sid turns on him. And then if I'm not mistaken, I think Shawn was written out of storyline until like early June-ish. And that sort of facilitated the face turn and the eventual realignment with Diesel. So they were definitely going all in with Vince's decision to make Shawn a babyface. And, that was something he'd been contemplating for a while. He stuck the course with it. And it blew up in his face. But we'll explore more of that as the timeline advances through these retro Raws. I forgot just how much more horrible shit we're in store for. But for now, we will go ahead and talk about the main event for WrestleMania 11. You knew it had to be, based on the build-up. Nothing else got more attention in the last 3 months than Bam Bam versus Lawrence Taylor. And indeed, they were the featured attraction for this card. They went through all the pomp and circumstance of the layered football entrances, having the opposing team players run down through the entrance tunnel, $1 Million Corporation and the NFL crew. And I'll tell you what, watching some of the corporation teammates jog through the aisleway, cardio is not everybody's strong suit. And of course, the whole thing's made even more ridiculous by the fact that during the pre-match scuffle with both factions, the NFL players were physically dominating the pro wrestlers, just making the entire wrestling business look stupid. Do I even need to mention the fact that the fucking wrestlers are the heels in this storyline? Because that makes sense, right? As a pro wrestling fan who was purchasing a pro wrestling pay-per-view, obviously I'm supposed to hate the pro wrestlers and cheer for the fucking football players. Only in Vince's perverted, twisted, fucked up mind. So this match, evidently it's remembered as being more of a spectacle than a technical classic. Now LT did a lot of training beforehand to prepare for this, and I will credit him for his work. That guy laid his shit in. He did not hold back. For all the complaining I do about guys' offense looking so phony in today's business, Lawrence Taylor looked really convincing. He was throwing some great worked punches, some really nice looking stiff forearms, tossing Bam Bam around like a sack of potatoes. Considering how little time he spent in a wrestling ring preparing for the match, and he was already 10 steps ahead of where Mongo was like 3 years after this. If LT and Mongo had switched spots in WCW like a year or two later, they could have really made some money off that guy. Seriously, though, this was so much better than it had any right to be. Didn't get a lot of time. But again, it wasn't supposed to be a WrestleMania classic. It was a celebrity showcase. And I think for what the expectations were going in, I think they pulled it off better than anybody anticipated. LT had good selling, good facials. We already talked about his offense. That all looked really good. I mean, it's hard for me to criticize a lot about the match because the crowd was super into it. It was definitely the right call to have a main event the show. I think the problem, though, is that after everything we had seen for the previous 2 hours, by the time we got here, I was kind of over it. I was just ready to see LT evidently win. Oh, because, did I mention? The story with this feud is that the wrestlers suck, and that they're totally inferior to the football players at their own game. Now, to be fair, Bam Bam worked over Taylor for a good chunk of it. They worked the story at the end where Bam Bam hit his finish on LT, the corkscrew moonsault, but he came down and landed wrong on his knee, so he could not execute a pinfall. And they kind of played around with it for a few minutes with the near fall attempts, until LT was ready to make his comeback. And straight out of the Ultimate Warrior playbook, when it was time for that babyface fire, it was no Cell City, brother. Taylor's just back up, dancing around like he was fresh as a daisy. And after a few stiff shoulder blocks, he goes up and gives Bam Bam a diving clothesline for the top rope and pins him. Because did I mention, the pro wrestlers suck, and they can't win at their own profession. Now, to be fair, there were a lot of hardcores in the crowd that booed this. There was no theme music afterwards, so you could hear it in the venue pretty well. Now, it wasn't like 50-50 split. It was more like 70 in favor of LT and 30 in favor of Bam Bam getting fucked over. But you could hear the boos. And, I wasn't the only one that hated the whole concept of Lawrence Taylor going over. Bam Bam was a trooper for signing off on that. I'd have put my foot down and said, Vince, how about we don't bury our own profession? But nobody was going to tell Vince that in 1995. So there you have it. That was your WrestleMania climax. Arguably the best match of the night. Second best, maybe only slightly behind the tag title match. And again, what's that really saying? There's a reason people often refer to this as the worst WrestleMania of all time. It is very difficult to dispute that notion. I've seen a lot of bad WrestleManias in my day. WrestleMania 9. 13, from what I recall, was pretty bad. Discount the submission match with Bret and Austin. I kind of alluded to WrestleMania 4 during the Clash review because, those two events were going head-to-head at the time. I think Mania 4 was more of a dud just because the whole thing was basically a glorified one-night tournament with a bunch of meaningless matches that had no backstory. And of course, there were plenty of other bad WrestleManias over the years, I'm sure. Some of the modern ones people often refer to, 27. I hear that one get bantered around a lot. I think that was the year Miz and Cena wrestled for the title in the main event. But the whole thing was basically like one giant infomercial to set up the next year's match with Cena and Rock. But man, I'll tell you, WrestleMania 11 is high up on that all-time bad list. And I'm sure as we continue along the timeline, we'll stumble across a few more clunkers. I mean, WrestleMania 17 is well renowned by a lot of marks because of the great match quality. Selfishly, I still hate that WrestleMania just because of all the bad connections with WCW and Vince basically erasing the entire Austin McMahon backstory in one night. I mean, all the ramifications that pay-per-view had afterwards basically killed the business for all intents and purposes. If I ever make it that far in this channel and we get to some of that invasion angle stuff, oh God, let me tell you, I have a thing or two to say about that fucking abortion of a year. Trust me, if you think I can't get visibly angry on camera, just you wait. I'll be peeking the microphone plenty during that time period. But, no, first I need to see if I can make it through the remainder of 95. I mean, this show was bad. Don't get me wrong. It didn't make me want to punch a hole through the wall or anything. Maybe that's just because I'm so numb to so much bad wrestling at this point. And this show, by comparison, doesn't really affect me all that much. But that's WrestleMania 11. Let it burn in the furnace of wrestling history and never be spoken of on this channel ever again. So with that, I'm going to briefly scour through my very limited SmackDown report here. I DVR'd the show on Friday night like I always do. I was planning on watching it on Saturday morning like I always do. Change of plans. I woke up, did a few morning routines, and around 7:50 a.m. I said, fuck it. Not in the mood. So rather than me watching the show, I decided to go to YouTube and do a sneak preview to see if there were any highlights worth checking out. And there was one item of business that I felt was worth mentioning. But before we talk about that headline, so to speak, let me just fill you in with the details about what I missed on Friday. The exciting, riveted television show that is Friday Night SmackDown. Just more reasons to validate why it's probably not even worth my investment to watch this shit after WrestleMania. Here is what I missed in terms of matches. Pretty Dreadly beat Randy Orton and Kevin Owens in a tag match due to Logan Paul's interference. Probably a good thing I didn't watch that. Elsewise, I'd have quit this channel and pursued a career as a monk. Austin Theory and Grayson Fodder beat the Street Profits to qualify for the ladder match. Bate and Dunn beat the Legado Lackeys to qualify for the ladder match. And Bianca Belair beat Dakota Kai in the TV main event. And I think there was some post-match stuff that involved the other big item of business. I remember seeing a picture of all of them pointing at the WrestleMania sign in very WWE-like fashion. So that was an instant turn-off. But of course, the one big item of business that everybody's talking about, I'm obviously referring to the official SmackDown debut of Jade Cargill. Apparently they decided now's the time to bring her up. So here she is. And, well, here's basically what they did with her. Nick Aldis brought her out. They gave her the whole red carpet intro with the lighting effects and all the usual WWE production. She grabbed the contract from Nick. She signed it. And then she basically cut a promo saying that she's a once-in-a-lifetime superstar and that nobody on the female roster is on her level. Then she flexed her biceps a few times. I would say it did not quite leave the impression that her AEW debut made when it was just train wreck level awesome. Here I would say it was just okay. I mean, they really didn't do anything in the initial promo to tease or even set up a potential Mania match for her. Or any feud for that matter. It was just her trying to recite some obviously pre-rehearsed lines to establish who she was. Is she a babyface? Is she a heel? It was kind of hard to tell from the initial promo. But when she came out at the very end of the night and helped to save Bianca and Naomi from Damage Control, by then it was pretty apparent. The timing of it seems a little odd if they're not going to have her work the Mania card. So I guess the match in that case would be, what, Dakota Kai, Asuka, and Kairi versus Naomi, Bianca, and Jade? It's kind of lame. A TV-level top-of-the-hour main event for a Mania card involving girls. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't have Jade Cargill work the WrestleMania show. What I am saying is this really all the faith they have in her right now? The fact that after all that training she's done, all the time she's had to work with real professionals and get actual constructive help, this is where she's at? She's a body in a 6-girls tag match where she'll probably only really do a few things and we'll just pray that she doesn't royally fuck anything up. I mean, here's the bottom line. I've been saying since the AEW run that I never really saw the appeal in Jade Cargill. I know I'm probably in a slim minority of people that actually have that opinion. She does fit the mold of the WWE machine much better. But still, man, like, after all this time, and she still can't cut a reasonably good promo without sounding overly rehearsed and scripted. And what's her work going to be like? You know, say what you want about the guy. He's a fucking idiot. But at least Tony Khan had the balls to let her try and go out there and work alone. His biggest flaw was letting her work long matches alone. But that initial idea of the whole 2-minute squash, have her go in there, hit somebody with her finish and win, I mean, that was probably the best thing they ever did with her. But even WWE is hesitant to let her do that. So we'll see. I mean, I really don't know how to judge it until I see her work. Against my better intuition, I'll probably end up watching that match just to see how Jade's progressed. Or regressed. I'll be able to draw a conclusion from there. But that's all I got with SmackDown. Jade Cargill's debut. And the rest of the show seemed to be every status quo SmackDown in the last how many years. I'm glad I chose to watch the highlights, because, I mean, I don't think I would have made it the entire 2 hours trying to fast forward through a bunch of that hot garbage. Pretty Dreadly just got a victory over two of the top babyfaces on the roster, both of whom are in signature matches for the WrestleMania card. And one of whom is Randy Orton. Think about that. Actually, don't think about it too long. It might drive you to drink. But hoorah! WrestleMania 40 is next weekend. And we'll see how things go. My excitement level has been waning for a long time now. And based on the efforts I saw with what they did on Friday night, they're not doing much to boost my enthusiasm. And from what I saw on the show, there was no bloodline. Apparently, The Rock beat the shit out of Cody Rhodes on Monday night, bloodied him up to death. So they're really trying something there, but meanwhile on the Blue brand, stuff happens. And a lot of it is very skippable. And speaking of programs that aren't doing much to boost my enthusiasm, you know, I've been relatively unenthused with a lot of these Retro NXT shows as of late. And the ongoing problems with the show are still prevalent. You know, just in terms of there being way too much focus on the early to mid-90s cartoon era of WWF. Too many bad gimmicks, hideous acting, completely inauthentic promo delivery. You know, it's that old Vince McMahon model. They're just trying to modernize it for a smarter audience. And boy, is it not working. For the Full Sail crowd, it works. But for me, not so much. You know, we're also in that period where, as I look around the roster at this point, ideally, you'd have thought a lot of these names would have wound up being the bedrock for future WWE programming around this time a decade later. Look at how many of these names have completely fizzled out. Just take the opener as an example. Emma versus Sasha Banks. And we obviously know about Sasha's status with AEW. You know, she's doing a bang-up job over there, driving away viewers and not doing anything to generate revenue for the product. Just like I knew she would. Because I've always thought she was overrated as fuck. But people don't want to believe me. And then there's Emma. I didn't even really put two and two together about this. The fact that she'd been gone from WWE programming for so long now, apparently they just quietly let her out of her contract. After literally just signing her like, what, a year and a half ago? You know, she's another textbook case of somebody that I never was all that impressed with when I first saw her in NXT a decade ago. Of course, that babyface gimmick was death. But like even facially, man, you look at the way she carried herself in the ring. Like you could tell she wasn't into this. She hated being there. And that's a reality of where we are 10 years after the fact. Sasha Banks, Emma, they no longer work for the company. Meanwhile, people kept saying, oh, these ladies are the future of the women's division. In any case, the match was completely uneventful. Emma did a bunch of stupid comedy spots early on, while looking completely unmotivated and bored. Sasha screamed a lot and drove me crazy. Charlotte was on the floor being pretty useless. And they end up doing a miscue spot where Sasha accidentally bumps Charlotte off the apron. And then Emma eventually gets the tap out to Sasha with the Emma lock. It was only like 5 minutes. So thank God for small favors. And no, I still have no explanation for the psychology of the Summer Rae head on a popsicle stick. I asked the question last week out of genuine curiosity, and now I'm just kind of over it. But moving on from that, let's quickly analyze another chapter in the We Have No Credible Opponents for the Ascension storyline. Another lather, rinse, repeat squash where they barreled over a couple of geeks. Whatever their names were. Jack and John Jingerheimerschmidt. The only thing I have to say about this is the spot or series of spots where Connor kept giving one of the job guys body slams into the ring ropes. How in the world anybody co-signed that? It's beyond me. That's like the perfect way to tear an ACL. getting thrown into the ropes like that. I mean, they're WWE ropes, so they have no give to begin with. And your legs get tangled up because there's no way to protect yourself. I mean, the guy was trying to sell his neck. Wouldn't be surprised if he got a little bit of whiplash off that. But it was just stupid. Don't do that shit, people. It's not a safe bump to take. If I owned a company and saw my boys doing that, I'd fine them $1,000 for each individual throw. So for the Ascension, it would have been $3,000. So here's a trip down memory lane. Y'all remember Brodus Clay? The former Tyrus? No, actually, I think it was the other way around, right? He was Tyrus on the indie circuit, but he was Brodus Clay in WWE. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the current reigning NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Brodus Clay. Need I say any more? I was really going back down memory lane. The good old days here on the channel, where I somehow tolerated watching the NWA product on YouTube and reviewing the shows here. And those reviews are still up on the channel if you're genuinely curious for whatever reason. If you can stomach the ability to listen to them, they're up there. The bastardized version of the NWA. The one that Billy Corgan ran into the ground because he's a fucking idiot. And for those that need further validation on just how idiotic Corgan is, he made Brodus Clay his NWA World Champion. End of sentence. So, oh yeah, Brodus Clay was still active in WWE at this point. He still wrestled like a broken down fossil. Although I can't tell if that was intentional on his part, because the announcers kept talking about the fact that he had recently lost his smile. Kept bringing up the whole Funkadactyls thing. You know, Brodus Clay splitting from them and basically turning heel. Can't remember, what was the backstory behind that? Wasn't he originally supposed to debut as a heel and then Vince changed his mind at the last minute and just made him a dancing babyface? Oh, God. I don't know. Maybe he was intentionally trying to change up his moveset to work more like a bad guy. Who knows? All I know is the match was boring. Brodus ended up giving Xavier a standing powerbomb at one point, which prompted a better than Batista chant. Still heckling that guy. And then he won with a middle rope splash like 10 seconds later. And Xavier Woods is still the designated NXT jobber. And you want to know what the amazing thing is? That guy is still employed with WWE all these years later. The guy that never wins a match on NXT. After all the bullshit he had to deal with 10 years ago, doing job after job to all the developmental talent. Yeah, that guy still has a contract. The majority of everybody else on this show, not so much. I think that guy's the real MVP of WWE. Oh, and we can't forget this. After Brodus Clay won, he cut a very menacing heel promo, noting that he's going to start taking from people because he's fed up being a nice guy. And it starts with going after Adrian Neville in the NXT Championship. He said, "The man that gravity forgot is about to feel the gravitational pull." Because, you know, he's fat. And, I mean, hey, he said the quiet part out loud. Don't shoot the messenger. He also got wutted by everybody in the crowd. That wasn't a good sign. But they are doing the right thing by trying to build up some credible heel challengers for Neville to face. Yeah, the monster heel versus scrappy underdog babyface is a classic tale as old as time. We'll see how good Neville is. Trying to pull a decent TV match out of Brodus Clay. I won't hold my breath. And actually, staying on that subject momentarily, I thought Neville actually did a decent promo to follow up on the Brodus Clay challenge. He basically called out the idea of Brodus thinking that he's going to waltz into NXT and take away the top prize just because he isn't getting the proper respect on Raw or SmackDown. He's already underestimating the talent pool down in NXT because he's been conditioned to think those guys are green. Well, the landscape has changed. It is a new era on the black and gold brand. Hell yeah, man. Neville's sticking up for the young guys. He put over the roster, said they're just as good and just as talented as the main roster guys. Debatable. But he said if Brodus earns his title shot, then Neville will be ready to defend. Then we had that awkward WWE silence where Neville had to look at the camera for about 10 seconds before they finally cut away. Classic Vince shit right there. But, again, all seriousness, they're trying. It's not the most ideal title program, but, you know, as a TV-level mini-feud to give Neville something to do before TakeOver in May, sure. I could think of far worse opponents to go with than Brodus Clay. I mean, at least the guy looks like a badass. Can't say the same for some of the other dorks on this roster. Cough, cough, Tyler Breeze. Hey, speaking of the handsome devil, Coinky Dink. Guess who wrestled next? Prince Pretty himself. The man whose fur boots were made out of Peruvian hunchback peacocks. Or something to that degree. I don't remember what William Regal said. I'm sure it was far more ridiculous than whatever I just butchered. Anyway, here's everything I wrote down. Oh, by the way, the match is Tyler Breeze versus Yoshitatsu's 5-star theme music. He gets cooler as the weeks go by. The match goes about 3 minutes. William Regal spent the whole time fawning over Breeze's gimmick. Also making sure to plug his Twitter handle, @gorgeous. Yup, I just said that out loud. I apologize. And Breeze eventually went over with the beauty shot from literally out of nowhere. That is all. Then he took a few selfies afterwards. And that pretty much led us to the main event. It is Sami Zayn versus Corey Graves. They've been working the concussion story with Zayn after Graves had shoved him into the ring post a couple weeks back. Even though Zayn's head came nowhere close to making contact with the ring post, but we'll just ignore that faux pas. But the doctors had reluctantly cleared Sami for this match because he wanted it so bad. So they do a couple inset promos beforehand. Zayn talked about the fact that he feels fine, but there are bigger problems at hand than the condition of Sami Zayn, because his issue with Graves is personal now. Then Graves cut some really stupid promo about bears and wolves. Something about a bear getting his paw caught in a trap and how the wolves came out to hunt him down. The fuck? Who writes this shit? Hope that writer was castrated for life. And Graves' delivery didn't help. Now that said, I don't want to completely shit on the match because, you know, what they did here was fine. It was actually pretty good by the end. They worked the concussion story as best they could. After getting through some of the initial mind game stalling stages with Corey, and, Sami got to fire up for a little bit, they eventually let things settle down with Corey working over Sami's neck and his head. And the one thing Sami's always been naturally good at is selling and milking injury angles. With this particular one, he had that glazed over look all throughout the match where the ref was constantly trying to check on him. Sami keeps saying he's all right, but the longer it goes, the more dazed and confused he gets. And granted, there's an element to suspension of disbelief that has to be accounted for. Especially during the moments where Sami's trying to make a comeback, but he's still hitting all his usual offense with no problem. And then once it's time to sell again, he's like right back to being all wobbly and confused. But overall, I think they did a decent enough job getting the story across. The smart fans were kind of in and out for certain periods in the match. There were stretches where you had Graves working over Zayn in a chin lock, and people started heckling him with headlock chants. There was a lot of tongue-in-cheek banter by several of the smarter fans in attendance. It was kind of annoying. But the big moment in the match happened at the very end, after they were trading a couple near falls and Sami was starting to tease a comeback again. He goes up to the middle rope, but, quote, slips and loses his balance. Then as the ref goes to check on him again, Graves sort of catches Zayn from behind. Then he ends up going over with his lucky 13 submission after the ref finally stopped it. And the commentators did a good enough job addressing the fact that it wasn't a submission win. It was a ref stoppage win, because Zayn was basically unconscious by that point. It's, they're definitely going all in with the tear-down, build-up timeline for Sami Zayn. This whole road to redemption and his goal to climb back to the top of the mountain. And it's just been one roadblock after another since the loss to Bo Dallas last year. The stuff with Cesaro, some of the interplay between him and Tyler Breeze, now the stuff with Corey. They're definitely taking their time with all this. And since we know there is a satisfying payoff at the end, it is well worth the wait. God, I can only imagine what people were thinking at the time and not knowing how everything would play out. Especially given WWE's track record of story letdown. I remember seeing a lot of this unfold at the time and wondering, are they actually going to get to the point where Sami challenges for the NXT title again before he gets called up? Because that was the other thing in the back of my head, too. People kept saying that Vince was eventually going to see the popularity of Sami in NXT and he was going to want to bring him up to the main roster to kind of catch more of that spark. Of course, they waited like another year and a half to pull the trigger. But, it's kind of like the Cody Rhodes storyline of 2024. Slow burn build, milking the shit out of the eventual payoff. I guess we'll see if the same holds true for Cody's road to redemption by next weekend. It is a little more significant than Sami's climb to the top of NXT's developmental system. But it is similar in terms of the way they're laying the timeline out. But that was NXT. Another one-note samba of a show, basically. A decent little main event preceded by a bunch of meaningless filler. I guess the other plot development here was the stuff involving Adrian Neville and Brodus Clay. But that was more of a tease than anything. It is a very simple show, all things considered. A lot of the time, they're really not pushing the boundaries any. It's mainly about building characters and trying to craft as many interesting stories as they can. And that is important to keep in mind. This show is still primarily a developmental program. We're not at the point where NXT sort of branches off and becomes its own niche product for the internet fans. Oh, trust me, we'll know when that period arises. That's when 99% of the audience is heckling the talent with headlock chants, or cheering for all the cool heels and booing all the bland baby faces. Oh, trust me, there is so much more to come out of all this. We have barely scratched the surface. But, to be continued with all that as we round out this show and get ready for another fun week ahead. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, make sure you subscribe, comment, and like the show for me. If you have some fond memories of WrestleMania 11, feel free to let me know in the comments. I hope those memories are not too fond. But we'll catch you guys on Friday for more classic content. Always appreciate the support where I can get it. And we'll catch you guys soon. Take care. Peace out.